What's going on? Welcome to Asian Cosell. So we got one here by tldr news. Yeah, why South Korea left wing on the rise? So let's listen in. I'm kind of seeing this video blind, so let's get into it. So here.
South Korea is heading for a snap presidential election after the country's constitutional court upheld the impeachment of President Yoon Suk-yeol and removed him from office just over a week ago for his botched imposition of martial law back in December. So, as the deeply polarized country gears up for a spontaneous presidential campaign, we're going to explain South Korea's political crisis, the upcoming election, and the significant change it could bring about. Before we start, if you're a fan of TLDR, we'd really appreciate it if you checked out our European sister channel. We're currently so close to reaching 1 million subscribers over there, so if you don't mind lending us a hand, we'd be so excited to finally reach 1 million. The link's in the description, or just search TLDR News EU. Thank you so much. We should start with some quick background on Yoon's martial law debacle, but if you want more detail, you can go back and watch our videos from the time it happened. They're linked below. Anyway, to sum up, late at night on Tuesday the 3rd of December, then President Yoon, a conservative who'd been in office since 2022, announced that he was imposing martial law on the country, something that had not been done since the end of military rule 4 decades ago. Martial law was short-lived, however, as enough lawmakers soon gathered at the National Assembly and voted to overturn the declaration. This, coupled with growing protests, forced Yoon to back down, and after just 6 hours, he lifted martial law. 10 days later, the National Assembly voted at the Constitutional Court. Fast forward through the next 4 months of protests and political turmoil, and we come to April the 4th. The Constitutional Court's decision was unanimous, with all 8 justices voting to remove Yoon from the presidency.
Yep, and because right now I'm in the States, but in South Korea, yeah, I was like, what? 6 hours? What, martial law? And as you can see, using that term martial law and shutting stuff down, of course, I slept and woke up and went, okay, what the hell happened? But yeah, those are words you don't want to use as a president, and because in the past, it was just severe when you use martial law because the past presidents have used that, and yet it's backfired. So here we go.
While the court did acknowledge Yoon's frustration at the political gridlock with the opposition-controlled National Assembly, it did not hold back in its. The head of the court said that Yoon's declaration of martial law and his deployment of the military and police to disrupt the National Assembly and raid the National Election Commission, quote, violated the basic principles of the rule of law and the principles of a democratic state. And in themselves, they infringe upon the constitutional order and seriously threaten the stability of the Democratic prosecutor who only entered politics in 2021 and was elected president in 2022. He joins a pretty long list of South Korean presidents whose terms ended in disgrace, though he's only the second to be removed by the Constitutional Court. The first being Park Geun-hye in 2017. Nevertheless, Yoon's court treated on Horton since 1997, and Yoon would presumably be hoping that a future president would pardon him, as has been the case for a number of disgraced former South Korean leaders. But we'll put that aside for now and focus on the big question. What happens to South Korea? Well, the removal of Yoon, which is Lee Jae-myung, the leader of the centre-left opposition Democratic Party. Lee was actually the party's candidate back in 2022, when he was beaten by Yoon with a record-thin margin. Despite that loss, Lee has remained a dominant force in Korean politics. He's back to the country's legislative elections. At the beginning of last year, he survived an assassination attempt. And then, during the brief period of martial law in December, he live-streamed himself climbing over the fence of the National Assembly to bypass the military. However, the populist Lee is a polarizing figure, and he has his fair share of scandals. In fact, the man faces several legal that could complicate it doesn't seem likely that these trials will be concluded before the snap election takes place. In announcing his presidential run last week, Lee, an advocate of universal basic income, aimed to position himself as a champion of the people, pledging to tackle wealth inequality and economic hardship. But having recognized the importance of moderate voters, particularly conservatives unhappy with the ruling party, Lee has also been trying to appeal to the political center ground, with talk of prioritizing economic growth, the importance of the US alliance, and reforming taxes. Although this is a delicate act. She is already frustrated with his core union. And a status is affected by the followers and candidates for the People Power Party. The direction that the People Power Party goes from here will shape the race, as the ruling party is split between pro-Yoon and anti-Yoon factions. One People Power presidential hopeful is former party leader Han Dong-hoon, who publicly broke from Yoon after his martial law declaration, and has positioned himself as an anti-Yoon conservative who can keep centrist voters on side and prevent what he's called a monster government, led by Lee Jae-myung. The People Power Party could go another direction, though, and nominate someone like Labour Minister Kim Moon-soo, a staunch defender of Yoon who's popular with the right wing of the Conservative Party, a move that would surely alienate more centrist voters. Presumably, Lee Jae-myung's polling lead might narrow once the People Power Party chooses its nominee, although given the rift within the ruling party, it's not a stretch to imagine it might be difficult for it to unify around whoever the nominee ends up being.
Why don't you invest in tax liens? This is exactly what the wealthiest.
Okay.
In any case, Lee Jae-myung also enjoys significant leads in head-to-head polls, making clear that he's the man to beat. So the greatest hurdle to his potential victory may well be his own legal challenges, rather than any competitor. Whoever wins, though, will have a full in-tray on day one. For example, on the security side, tense relations with North Korea. On the economic, navigating the export-heavy economy through the Trump-induced global trade war. And on the political side, making up for a multi-month leadership vacuum. Additionally, South Korea's deep political polarization will not disappear upon the election of an election campaign, instead deepens the divisions. However, if, as polls suggest, Lee Jae-myung does win, South Korea will at least hopefully bid goodbye, as the party control of the National Assembly and presidency would be aligned, at least until the next election.
Oh, and by the way, if you look at South Korea, you usually don't need majority of voters in Seoul. You need majority of voters on the other side. You want, Gangwon, you want Busan, Daegu. So you got to control the east coast of South Korea. And if you control the east coast of South Korea, pretty much you will win the election. So it's based on popular vote, just to let you know.
This story, like much of the news, is worth paying attention to in the weeks ahead. Because with geopolitics in flux and Trump throwing the international order up in the air, there's a lot to keep an eye on. Every day we're faced with weird headlines, from Musk declaring anyone who looks at him the wrong way a terrorist, to Trump declaring war on Jupiter to try to regain some extraterrestrial allies. Okay, that one isn't real, but we do dive into the weird world of US politics in our series WTF USA. That's our show where we take big moments from culture and social media and try to explain the political implications of, say, Musk running around trying to put out Tesla fires. Unlike some of our other serious videos, the tone of WTF is more lighthearted and takes something of an irreverent look at what's going on. If you're interested, WTF USA can be found exclusively on Nebula. Nebula is also the home to other incredible original content from your favourite creators, like Tom Nicholas's Boomers, discussing everything from generational inequality, housing, the climate crisis, and pensions. The globe-trotting feature-length documentary tries to unpack the questionable legacy of the baby boomers. If you didn't know, Nebula is an independent platform FUSA either. You can also watch every normal TLDR video on Nebula ad-free, and in some instances before they even land on YouTube. If you're not a member already, click our link in the description.
Okay, so yep, TLDR, information on the Yoon. So yep, so there's a presidential election, I think, on June 3rd. So, and that's even, I think, another national holiday, I think, because that's Monday. Oh, so I think I might have to double check if I have another holiday. So yeah. All right. So if any of you enjoyed any of this content, please give me the HKL special. Help the king out. Hit the like, subscribe, and comment. And wherever you are, stay safe. And I'll see you in my next